Alrighty, hello people and good morning! So congratulations, you've managed to get through the game. That is to say, you beat story mode. So what happens now? The game's over, right? Oh no, the game has just begun. So if you didn't know, there's a hell of a lot of side and post-game content to this game. In fact, it's a bit like, you know how a lot of folks, when FFTA 2 first came out, there were a couple of reviews out there that were like, oh man, this thing's so short, the story's like 10 missions, and then you had the other folks that were finishing it up like 4 years down the line, like, crap, that was a long 300 missions. It's kind of like that, because there's a lot to go through here. Many folks think, you know, they came here for the story, they experienced it once, there's nothing new to experience, because I'll just go back and I'll curb stomp it all. Well, here's the deal. So, for the sake of reference, this is actually a save file from my first, well, it's not exactly my first time through, it's more like I went through the game once on neutral and then pretty much completed it, went for a bit of a joke run afterwards, and accidentally overwrote my original save, and so this, like, second Chaos playthrough kind of became the de facto original save file. So, as you'd expect many people in this game to figure out, we've figured out archers are pretty good, we've finished the game at about 20 to 25-ish. We got our plot swords, we got a few random items. For the life of me, I have no clue where I actually found the cloud shoes. But yeah, looking back on it, no clue what those are doing there. As would expect, turned Mr. Donalto into a Terror Knight, because that guy looks terrifying. And yeah, it was just a fun time overall. So, things you should know, again, in the endgame. Stuff to pay attention to. You know these stats over here that I was going on about earlier? Don't forget that some stuff that you put into your offhand potentially gives you really good stats. So, for example, the Petrodar blowgun doesn't seem like very much, but you know what? 15 strength is kind of ridiculous. In fact, it's double the bonus from like one of the strongest strength weapons in the game. I believe this might actually be the high strength bonus. It's weird. So yeah, keep a lookout for weird bonuses all over the place, like, you know, for example, immunities to different debuffs, or, for example, if you wind up finding yourself in the 20 to 25 range for your archers, you may actually find some crescent bows. These are shockingly rare, and I'm a little bit surprised that I found 2 of them on what is more or less my original file here. Now, you probably figured out crafting. You probably figured out it's pretty good. You probably just kind of haphazardly slapped everyone together like I did here. Now, why am I still going on about all this? Well, stuff's different your second time through. Stuff's very different. And in fact, the first time through, like I said, it locks everything down. Your first time through, there's level caps on every story fight. After you do that, you can go back in time to any point in the story that you've previously unlocked, and you know what happens? They work just like the random battles now. Except this time, they've got full skill sets. They've got full equipment and everything else. They're going to have different versions as well. So, something you need to know, if you're underneath 25, usually, I mean, sometimes it's as low as 20, but in most cases, if you're on the lower end, you will have a completely different skill set up to the above 20 skill set here. Additionally, their equipment will actually always be scaled by level now. So, this means that when they start at the fight, they will always use their preferred thing that still matches their level up, you know, kind of up to this point, up to a certain thing. And that's why I use this as an example, because right over here, we see two-handers have access to the Desert Blade, and you'd think that this would give them a massive advantage. Here's the thing. Elemental weapons become a bit more common now. So stuff like two-handers, spears, occasionally some bows, and occasionally see knights running around with, like, Walloon swords and things like that. But you'll see basic versions of elementals. Unlike other games in the series, your initial elemental options are a decent bit weaker than your later ones. And in fact, you have, like, give or take 3 or 4 tiers, depending on how you want to look at it. But the initial ones, like, this looks like it would be a massive upgrade. They've got those elemental options we were talking about from before. However, most of the AI characters, at least early on, will not come with an augment. This means that you might get the wrong idea that, well, this guy's using a desert sword. Elemental augments must not matter that much. I mean, they do basically the same damage as somebody using a normal weapon at that point. And yes, they are not augmenting their element, meaning that they are not getting a bunch of bonuses off of that weapon. Alright, next thing they need to know, and I guess there's really no need to go too far into this fight, but But yeah, expect a lot of new mechanics around. For example, many characters will be running around with Deflect, so if you've been invested into your archers very heavily up to this point, you may be shocked to find that, yeah, their arrows are bouncing off left and right. A lot of characters will come with Deflect, especially at ranks 3 and above, which means that there is a 15 or higher % chance that those arrows do absolutely frickin' nothing. Even Tremendous Shot, even Double Shot. Each has a chance to be deflected. Also, apparently I was kind of feeling weird on this run and turned Canopus into an axe build, which actually brings to mind an interesting note here, that you may notice that some of your craftables are all over the place as well. For example, his upgraded axe from this point doesn't really give him too much of an actual penetration bonus, but it does give him a racial damage bonus, so it just kind of scales up higher. Why am I bringing this up? Well, all of your bonuses get super weird at this point, so expect that to be a thing. Additionally, you may notice these archers are not doing crazy amounts of damage, because yes, they have not hit their elemental options. Once you go full elemental with it, that's when the game basically says, okay, fine, screw it, magic's involved, everything's broken now. Like, again, I was saying earlier how this game is functionally balanced, like something like D&D, like old tabletop games. If we're talking inspiration, it's everywhere here. Everywhere from the themes, everywhere up to the balance, to even the presentation itself is pretty much exactly like an old tabletop game. I mean, it even has a bunch of literally direct references, like the Blackmore boss. Like, you ever thought about how all of this is essentially just a bunch of different character sheets? Yeah, that's exactly what's going on here. So, that all being said, what is my actual point? How does this relate to the end game? Well, there's a bunch of new adventures to go on, and that suddenly means that all of your crazy magical items and things like that are expected to be broken. Now, how broken are we talking? How much new stuff is there to actually see? Because surely, you know, this is the end of the game. We've gone through it all, so let's look and compare it with a... Just ignore this this ending real quick. I'm just going to skip through all of it. There's a whole second ending that you haven't seen yet. Which means that this is the true ending, as in the complete lie ending. Anyway, hopefully someday it won't be a lie. But once you get to the very end, well, you start seeing a whole bunch of new things pop up all over the place. Well, that is to say, that is the true ending. You can actually get, you know, like, Lanza's sword and everything else. But what does this look like in the grand scheme of things? So you've probably gone through one route. You've seen one route showing up here in the Warren Report. Warren Report lets you warp back to any point in time to these anchor points, as they're called. Just so you know, if you're looking to go back and alter the story, everything does not cascade forward. Basically what this means, like, let's say you wanted to go back here, you were on Chaos and you wanted to switch over to Neutral, right? So you'd go back to this point, you do these two fights, and then suddenly you decide, okay, let's hear Lenar out, and then we're suddenly on this route. And then you make it all the way to here, right? Complete that first fight, which, by the way, this fight right here, definitely one of the reasons that I love Neutral. It's just everything about the Neutral route is so dang tragic. Anyway, so you make it to this point. If you were to load this one, this whole section would essentially kind of be its own bubble, because history has only been rewritten up to this point. Everything past this point is as it was originally. So you'd have to go through and repeatedly make all those same decisions and go through and go through and go through. So you'd have to carry that progress forward, meaning that, yes, if you wanted to complete all of Coda, just know right now, while there are 4 chapters, you can't even unlock Chapter 3 unless Kashua is alive in the story. Do not do what I did, go through the entire thing and then realize, oh crap, I only saved her up until the Hanging Gardens, and I never redid all of Coda with her in there. To know whether that's actually the case, go over here, make sure that she's actually alive, right? If it says her coronation fast approaches, congratulations, she's probably alive. If you see anything else that says she's alive, there you go. If it says, oh yeah, she just died, that sucks, you idiot, yeah, that means that she dead. Another funny thing that I feel like I should probably mention, when you get to the very end of the game, all of the ages of all the characters end up going up, based off the number of days you've actually spent on the campaign. So, yes, the one time that their ages adjust, it's just kind of funny. Additionally, kind of, oh, by the way, ignore the impossible builds. This is kind of like a test file. Just, it's fine. So what are those Coda chapters? Well, you go down here, you go to talk. If you didn't ever look at talk, like let's say you came off of FFT, you kept thinking like that report thing in the background is useless, unless you're looking at, ghosts in the mine or whatever else. Yeah, so instead, what you have over here is a list of different news events that are current. These are going to update every time that you hop through time and whatever else. But what you need to know is at the start of it, you'll get 2 of them for sure. Omish and Bending of Time. This is the one that lets you know that World Mode, that's that time warping thing, is unlocked. This is Songstress of Omish. This is Coda 1. Funnily enough, it actually mentions this down in the manual. Gives you updates for all these quests. So, like, for example, it says for the Songstress, the quest becomes available when Songstress of Omish is added to the talk section of the Warren Report. The quest begins in Port Omish. Both Canopus and Sir Gildas must be in your party and alive. Now, to clarify, this means alive in terms of they're in your party and they currently are not out of lives. I know this seems like a weird distinction, but they can be dead as doornails in the actual story. Doesn't matter. For example, you can do this one on neutral. Somewhat spoilers. Anyway. There's only one character that needs to be alive in order to complete all of this. Alright. So, part 2 is the search for Warren. There's your Star Trek reference. The quest becomes available as soon as the King of Brigantis is added to the talk section of the report. Now, the quest begins in Heim, Episode 1. The Songstress must have been completed. Canopus, Murden, and Gildas must all be in your party and alive. Again, just have their lives. Now, this part doesn't update until you complete it, but True Night, so beginning of the quest becomes available after Rising from the Ashes is added to the talk section. This entry only appears if Chapter 4 has been completed with Kashua and Kashua is in your party and alive. What they're saying is, yes, Kashua has to actually survive the entire story, and she has to be there because she has to open up what's basically a VA clinic. So, yeah. Anyway, so starts on Heim, then search for Warren must have been completed, Kashua has to be in the party, and then the 4th one is the Magnificent 12, aka the true ending, aka let's go back in time and screw up the intro. This part, I love that this is just the way that they decided to go with this, because with the whole time travel mechanic and everything else, why wouldn't you have it end literally where it started? It's fantastic. Anyway, so beginning of the quest, this becomes available when a Monument to Peace is added to the talk section. This entry only appears if Chapter 4 has been completed, with all of them alive in the party. And then begins in Goliath. The previous things have to have been completed, and they have to be in your party. So that's all there, just so you know. Okay, so that's all, the Coda stuff. Okay, fine, that's DLC. What other side quests were there? Over here, if you didn't know, there was a pirate side quest for Azelston. I will leave a recruitment guide in the description, just so you know how to go do that. I don't want to go into all the details, but there's a whole, I'd say 20-plus battles to deal with his whole side quest. Previously, back in Chapter 2 Law, there's a whole section over here for saving Ravenous multiple times. That's about 5 extra battles for you. Then you have all of the Temple side quests, which is probably a solid 40-plus battles to go through. So that is basically going through. You read the news. I believe there is a old version of it on here right now. But yes, the Tigers stir, as well as different fortresses having people in there. Now, if you've already beaten the game, this Elemental Temple side quest won't really work right. Because by this point they're just kind of I believe at this point in the story I actually have all of them completed. Once they're all completed, they just sort of become random not quite random, but they become dungeons you can go back and go through for extra loot. But yes, so for the Elemental Temples, in the middle of Chapter 4, you'll get a notice that, hey, there's a bunch of bums that moved into all the forts. Mr. King, would you like to get off your ass and fix that? So essentially, that's what you go do. So if you go through, you unlock the locations behind all the fortresses. So presumably you've done Lindel and things like that over here. That unlocks the ones over here. The wood does not have to be opened, but yeah, this unlocks the final fortress down this way. So what you do, you go through each of those fortresses, you clear them out of all the vagrants, then you go talk to the Pope over here. This is not a recruitment quest, by the way, that's why I'm going through it. But yeah, once you talk to Mr. Pope guy, after you clear out those forts, they say, hey, the Apocrypha's a thing. That's pretty cool, huh? So you go there, you talk to the Pope about elemental nukes, and then you're like, hey, no, it's fine. I'm responsible. You can totally trust me with this. He totally can't trust you with this, but it's fine. So yeah, you get that. For those that saw the episode on elemental stacking, the forbidden spells apparently have the highest ratio of increasing your elemental stack per cast, so you can go crazy momentum nutso with that. Alright. So that's all that. All those temples, they have a boss in there. They give you a unique elemental nuke, more or less, that you can teach to a lot of your casters. The Forena Sisters get a unique class out of it. They actually are the best potential max magic damage in the game with all of that. Additionally, you get crafting books from each of these. So if you ever wondered, like, hey, how do I get those weird earrings and chokers and stuff some of the bosses have now? You get those from the crafting books. You actually find some of your, I believe it's all the weapon necklaces or earrings up here. I believe I know guns. Guns and shields are going to be in the Fire Fortress over here. I believe Kandriga had, I want to say daggers and fists or something like that. There's just a crapload of them. You're guaranteed to get 1 to 3 of them, depending on what thing you're looking at from the final boss. Like, you're guaranteed to at least get one of the crafting books. You can actually go back to attempt the rest of them after all of them have been completed. And additionally, around levels 3 or 4, there's going to be more crafting books that you can actually get from random characters. Like, for example, if you're looking for the gun enchilada, as I like to call it, there's a Fusilier on this giant staircase that spawns on the left side of the map, and they're pretty likely to drop that book. Any dang ways, those suckers are all over the place. Farampa, actually, I assume most folks have probably gone through it at this point, but, you know, there's, I think, like 4 or so crafting books, as well as a unique ring in there. So there's stuff all over the dang place as far as that goes. Actually, I would say the Elemental Temples are probably some of my favorite maps in the game. But speaking of frickin' awesome maps, once you complete Coda 1, so you get Yuria in your team, you get the San Bronza Ruins. Now, whether you want to call these the Floating Ruins, San Bronza, you know, Tower of Law Eternal, or whatever else, these are some of the most beautiful maps in the game. Like, this stuff goes insane, and I believe these might be some of the largest. Additionally, they also have some of the craziest, just like craziest stuff in general in there. Like, I believe one of the final maps might actually be a direct reference to Night of Lotus, because it looks almost exactly like the final door you go through. You also get a class that you can unlock here, where you turn your undead units into angels. But yeah, you get a bunch of huge maps. Usually starts off with stuff like this, goes into literal, like, flying, crumbling ruins towards the end of it. You see all kinds of crazy stuff. So yeah, some of the crazier architecture is going to be in those ones. What else? You've so like I mentioned, when you go back in time, you see different party layouts for a lot of fights and stuff like that. You have the entirety of that pirate area that that isn't covered during the pirate side quest, so you got that to go through as well. Let's see what else. Oh, if you didn't know, there's actually infinite money by this point, too. I might say that's 37 grand. What the hell? No. So, if you didn't know, all your crafting by this point has been entirely dictated by your base stats. Oh, by the way, we haven't even gotten into Palace of the Dead and all that. But yeah, everything up to this point, crafting-wise, has been determined entirely by base stats for all your characters. So while they've been going up very slightly in the background, well, they've actually been upgrading your crafting odds. So with everybody getting pretty high up there, like let's say we go back to the original, original weapons and stuff like that, most of them are going to be guaranteed or close to guaranteed, whereas they were maybe 50% earlier on. So this goes up and up and up. Like, for example, when I did, I believe it uses the highest value in the team to determine different things, and sometimes it's, strength, dexterity, what have you. It's all over the place. I know when I did a solo run, the odds for many of these things actually hopped up to 100 after I got 100 stats, so just so you know. Alright. So now that we know that, what am I talking about for infinite money? You got this thing back in Chapter 4. This is the gem book that let you craft different rings. This is the one craftable item that will actually give you a profit. How does that work? Well, let's say we go over here. We craft some crystal ore, right? The odds are not fantastic. However, you're basically taking several, about 70% or so odds in order to be able to actually pull this off. So once you get 3 of these, so you basically take your unrefined ore, which is about 6 grand for a full stack. You go and you spend them all on making crystal ore. Wow, these, the RNG is pissed today. Holy crap. This is something else. So yeah, you take your about 70-80% odds. You craft a bunch of them suckers. Turn them into ice crystals, right? Then you go over here. So you've spent 6 grand in total. You can make, if we count those 99s. So let's say we make, 10 sets of these. And then you go over here up to these orbs, and let's say you've got 60% odds to make them. So, generally speaking, those are the kinds of breakdowns that we're looking at. So we've made one. What do these actually sell for? So again, remember, we spent 6 grand to actually make that entire stack of things there. So now we go over to sell it, and that can sell for 4,500. So this basically means as long as you make at least 2 of them, you're already running a profit. You can potentially make, if we're following the numbers exactly, you're probably getting about anywhere from 5 to 7 on average. I've gotten like 12 before when it ended up having a critical success. So you can have a critical success chance on your items. Basically, this means that, you'll craft something and it'll make 2 of them. It usually won't do that for stuff like the orbs, but all the materials to make the orb, it will. Alright, more crap that shows up in the endgame. If you've gone through Palace of the Dead, you may not have made it all the way to the bottom. There's a bunch of stuff that you get out of there. For example, your first time through, if you get down there, there's 3 different versions that I should point out. If you're doing Palace of the Dead and you want to experience most of the stuff in there but don't feel like driving yourself crazy trying to get all the drops, here's what you do. You actually go down there before the game ends. So you go down there in Chapter 4. It should be completely doable. Just buy a bunch of exorcisms. You make it part of the way down. There's additional shops. At that point, you get Banish. That's one of the things. It's basically the exorcism necromancy that you get in Palace of the Dead. It's about half the cost. So, you make about 99 of those, you take whatever your A-team was and just plow on through there, exercise everything with items, don't worry about it. Get down to the bottom and you'll have a fight with Nibith, who will then drop several of these palace guides, which allow you to skip 25 floors. Additionally, you will get a Heaven's Fork in most cases, as well as Secrets of the Master. That's the hardest to get crafting book in the game. So, what all these do? These Heaven's Forks are essentially optional enemies. These are optional boss fights that unlock all over the dang place. Like, some of them are in Palace of the Dead. Like, in one of the cases, you can actually show up to try to enter the shop and you get a boss fight instead. Or, for example, there's a couple in Farampa. There's a couple, like, in the bigger maps there. So, like, the Volcano map. Dormant Volcano map, as well as the Cliffside map near the end. Wonder at the Gods, I believe it's called. Additionally, you see stuff like elixirs popping up in certain places that are pretty hard to get a hold of, but they restore a life. So with these Heaven's Forks, you will use one as soon as you enter the fight. The boss has a chance to drop some of the best items in the game. So, for example, they'll have unique weapons that they all can drop. They also have some unique, not unique, but good armor in a lot of cases. Additionally, speaking of loot and things, if you wanted some of the crazier gear and stuff like that, many times you can go back to those elemental temples. And if you randomly run into the boss in there, you find them a second time, they have a chance to drop, like for example with Fire Temple, it's like a unique fire shield and gauntlets, which are pretty solid. Okay, so kind of getting back on track here in terms of crafting and things like that. Like I mentioned, there's books all over the place. You get all kinds of different equipment now. These elemental chokers are arguably the strongest because, it's like 30% bonus to your, I believe it's actually like 40% bonus to your elemental power, which applies both offensively and defensively, which makes you very resistant to that element in particular and also makes you hit like a frickin' truck. Additionally, you have the defensive options here, which will give you a weapon bonus, as well as a racial bonus, as well as a defense bonus against everything. So these are pretty solid. It looks like on paper their initial thing is supposed to be for the additional weapon skill. Not quite. They're actually pretty solid. Anyway, moving on here. Secrets of the Master, though, what kind of stuff does this give you? You can have gauntlets that give you +2 anatomy, which means that potentially you can stack your anatomy up to like 15 or 16 by this point, which just, that's going to completely disassemble anything you run into. You've got some weapons here with really high crit on them. So, yeah, all kinds of stuff popping up there. I really love the whole detail that the entire helm in Chiridian is just for the worm scale helm. It's an OB64 reference. Body armor thing just gives you a bunch of fancy robes. Arm guards give you these things. Leg guards give you these things. Yeah, you get stuff everywhere. Funnily enough, yeah, the shield book gives you the light and dark shields, while most of the elemental options are just going to be hanging out in Palace of the Dead or the elemental temples. Sometimes they'll just drop them. But yes, there's maps on maps on maps on maps. Additionally, fairly early into Palace of the Dead, you get stuff like the Lobber +2, so by that point you get full item usage as well as kind of absurd range for one of those. And yeah, stuff just keeps going and going and going and going. And this is before, going through the different story routes and all of that. This is before just kind of re-experiencing what all the battles look like these days. So if you haven't run into Deneb's shop by this point, you may have missed it in Chapter 4, but her shop has a bunch of unique spells by this point. Once you end up unlocking Yuria, she's got some stuff for her as well. There's stuff to do here. So how would I recommend going through it? Because this is kind of running a bit long. I would personally recommend going back into the game, take whatever file you had. So, like for example, like I was doing with this other file here. Go here, go back to your initial party. Don't immediately try to reclass everybody as different things. I know I did that my first time through. I thought, hey, it's time to go back with different classes. It's going to be so weird. Don't. You'll just make yourself frustrated, to be honest. So see if there's any upgrades. You probably have a bunch of materials after Hanging Gardens. So for example, I really should have upgraded this guy to a better axe, but, whatever. He's still using one of the lower tier axes in the game. Doesn't matter. He's still fine. I've mentioned before, equipment, everything else, not nearly as important as skills. Like, they will, as long as you have penetration for armor, you're gonna do just fine. Don't obsess over trying to get the big numbers. I was mentioning earlier, apparently there is potentially a soft Iron Man mode in the game. This essentially means that if you don't retreat, you don't use Chariot, and apparently don't use Chariot or Tarot cards, supposedly your drop rate for rare stuff increases. I have not verified this, but you know what? Given this game, I would not be surprised if it's legit. So, still testing that one. Kind of got a run in the background that I'm working on for that one, but, we'll get there as we'll get there. Another thing you may be kind of curious about, what's the deal with these upgrades for garbage weapons you're never going to use for more than a couple rounds? Or a couple fights? Well, my friend, that is right here. Because sometimes you get guest characters that mechanically, according to the game, are not allowed to change their class. So what do? What are you to do in this particular case? Well, that's when you actually go and give them the upgrades in order to make sure they don't suck. I will say, in defense of the balance of archers in this game, without this guy rebalancing, even in his base gear, a level 25 archer from the AI at, I think rank somewhere 3 to 5 bows, still was not able to one-shot him. So, let's be blunt. When a player is playing it, sure, they can break it. The AI, in most cases, will not be breaking it. It's just, I don't know, I just think it's fun. Like, by this point, it really is just going into, the world is your oyster mode, as it were. So yeah, what I would usually recommend going and doing, just pick another route, go back in time, give it a second run, look up, depending on the route that you're using, look at the recruitment guide. Do you want to go pick up Azelston or something like that, or go pick up Ravenous? Do their side quest or something like that. Experience the story a second time, and then that's what I would recommend in the middle of Chapter 4. Go do the elemental temples. They have some really, really cool scenarios going. Well, not scenarios, but just scenery going on. So go explore through those. Then maybe go through Palace of the Dead at that point. Let me point out, there's plenty of drop guides out there. I even have one posted up on the guide. Don't obsess over getting every drop. You'll drive yourself insane because the AI will try to pick up your drops. So just focus on getting through it. You will get stuff. like I said right here, I've gotten some stuff on this particular run that I have no freaking clue how I ended up getting. It's stuff that normally would be somewhat rare, and for the life of me, I couldn't tell you, like, where these were. And again, this is after playing this thing, like, literally over a decade now. So you'll find stuff. There's plenty of stuff to find. As long as your character skills are up there, you'll do just fine. There's no need to focus on being overpowered. That's what burns people out in this game. I cannot stress that enough. Because there's so much to love, but as soon as you're trying to make god characters and then you're suddenly frustrated by the fact that some random thing blocks them, like I was mentioning earlier, a lot of characters or a lot of people go for the archers and get pissed off at deflect. I know personally that burned me out on a few runs too, and that's when the realization came down the road of, you know what? Good enough is good enough. Just focus on the journey, and some cool stuff will happen. So, hopefully this helps. If you have any questions about the endgame or anything like that, feel free to let me know. I'll leave that recruitment guide in the description there. And I feel like I'm still forgetting some stuff. I'm sure I'm forgetting some stuff. I mean, I never even covered the Lich or anything like that, or Angel Knights or any of those. That kind of requires its own guide. I mean, I've done an Angel Knight guide before. It's a bit of a pain. But, well, yeah, it covers everything that I kind of wanted to cover. And, you guys have a good one. Stay safe. Goodbye.